With the new rush of AAA VR titles entering the market, it can be tempting to only look ahead to what the future holds for VR. This is all well and good. I'm ready for VR to truly take off and see the attention it deserves from gamers and developers alike. But I'd regret not reminding new members of the virtual reality community that plenty of great games already exist for this brand new platform, even if they were early adopters that stumbled so future VR titles could run away with the baton. Some early examples of VR games that paved the way for other developers to make VR games and experiences, essentially taking the initial plunge into a then unrealized media, were games like Gorn, Moss, and Windlands. These games, and plenty of others, were the first to discover and refine the experiences that work best in VR. Gorn walked so that games like Blade and Sorcery and Boneworks could run. It introduced a valuable subgenre of VR games that has become a staple of virtual reality, if only an unnamed staple. Games that make you feel like a badass. Blade and Sorcery makes you feel like the person that third grade you turned into on long car rides or in the shower, mowing down wave after wave of enemies that add up to little more than lumps of clay waiting to be molded by your fists and blades. You feel like a badass as you pull off moves that you could only visualize in your mind when you were young, this time seeing the blows landing in real time. An underrated example of a VR title that makes you feel like a badass time-bending god is SuperHOT VR. SuperHOT originally existed as a flat-screen game with a simple but fascinating premise. Time moves when you move. This mechanic led to a fun and somewhat original game, but its full potential wasn't realized, in my opinion, until the developers made the jump to VR. Picture this. You're alone in a white void. You have a single companion in the expanse spanning miles and miles ahead of your field of view. You reach out, take the knife, and suddenly you're in an alley plastered with white and gray. A splotch of red disrupts the monotonous color scheme of your surroundings, and you realize the crystalline man standing before you is slowly making his way towards you. As you stare at the refracting light filtering through the faceless form before you, you remember the knife in your hand. You raise your hand to your face to study the blade, and you notice the crystal man before you gains a momentary boost in momentum. You freeze up, try to study his movement, and it's then that you realize his momentum is tied to your own. You're left with all the time in the world to question your current predicament. Players familiar with the flat-screen precursor to the game find themselves simply doing what the game asks of them, flailing their limbs until the crystal man is within arm's reach. They strike, he breaks to pieces, and the game moves on to the next scenario. But the curious or uninitiated might try to find a way out of their predicament. Maybe a non-violent solution will appear if they look around long enough. Eventually, the red man would reach them, and one of two things would happen. The uninitiated player would either strike out, defending themselves from the unknown entity, or they would let the being teach them the purpose of the blade in their hand. This isn't the first level of SuperHOT VR, but I think it would have been a better introduction to the game's mechanics than what the developers give us. Little is left up to interpretation as you pick up the gun presented to you and waste the crystal fool standing in your way. The flashing white text drives the central mechanic of the game home, and you move on to the next level. This intro is fine, it serves its purpose. Players know what to do from this point on, and the game never deviates from this mechanic, meaning they get the gist of the experience from the get-go. The lack of personal discovery is robbed from the player, but it's replaced with a great experience that has been lost under the heels of newer VR titles. It would be a shame if SuperHOT remained off of gamers' radars. 5 years later, it's all too easy to enjoy newer releases, and justifiably so. Boneworks and Blade and Sorcery both have slow motion a button press away, opening the door to scenarios that wouldn't be possible to the average player at normal speed. Newer games can scratch the itch for slow-mo gameplay, and do so while offering plenty of other activities, which makes SuperHOT look much less appealing to new VR owners. That's why I propose a new way to view SuperHOT VR. Oculus offers an excellent introduction to their controller's functionality through First Contact, teaching the uninitiated how to grab various items and manipulate them in various ways. The Lab offers a wide array of minigames that introduce new non-Oculus players to VR's mechanics. Both of these experiences can be vital in legitimizing VR's applications, but I'd argue that SuperHOT VR should be the next title offered to VR newcomers after their introductions are made. While it lacks the polish and innovation of newer VR releases, it offers a taste of what VR can offer in a short, easy-to-process package. Even the most unfortunate player can beat the game in less than an hour or so, and since the game's difficulty follows a very gradual curve, the headset can be passed around from VR newbie to VR newbie, allowing both single initiates and groups of newcomers to get a taste of what VR has to offer. Beat Saber also serves its purpose, allowing players to trade off between songs and take turns ramping up the difficulty. There's a reason it still tops the charts for both single player and multiplayer games in Steam VR. It's the game that got many interested in VR, and its accessibility brings with it a wide audience. But I have a request for VR owners showing their friends or family members VR for the first time. If the person you're showing VR to is capable of a little more movement than Beat Saber requires, maybe opt instead to show them SuperHOT. Beat Saber is great, but the ability to easily make VR newbies feel badass might just yield greater results in the drive to make VR more widely accepted as a future of entertainment. So, I think SuperHOT VR is a great tool for introducing virtual reality to new players. But you might be wondering how I feel about the game regarding VR veterans, or even newer VR players that have already experienced new VR titles. Well, I probably wouldn't recommend it. I know, I just spent the last few minutes claiming that SuperHOT should take the place of other games used to introduce peeps to VR, so you might be asking, what's the deal? Simply put, if you've played games like Gorn, Blade and Sorcery, or Boneworks, SuperHOT has very little to offer you. But those three games previously mentioned aren't really the greatest titles to show new players. The gore in Gorn might not be the best thing to show grandma when she puts on the headset, and the jankiness that VR veterans barely notice in Blade and Sorcery and Boneworks might make Gramps show off what he ate for breakfast. SuperHOT only relies on the player's movement, and while there is jank, it's nothing near the craziness found in more physics-based titles. So, if you want to be a little daring and show newcomers something besides Beat Saber, SuperHOT is the perfect fit. It's just not worth buying if you tend to keep the headset to yourself, or if you want to simply show off the convincing 3D effect that many of us take for granted after the first dozen hours of VR. I might have gotten unlucky, but I did run into a few issues with the game that people playing in short bursts wouldn't notice. These issues wouldn't affect the experience of people being shown VR for the first time, because I doubt they'd be able to play through the game in one sitting like I or other VR veterans can. The issues I ran into would really only affect people like me who sought out a fully fleshed VR game when they bought SuperHOT. Less than an hour for the campaign is laughable, and the replayability offered by the end-game activities like speedrunning modes and endless waves of enemies only stretches so far. VR vets might get 2 hours of playtime max out of this game before wanting to move on to something newer. The controls are basic, especially when compared to other shooters. You press the grip button to grab hold of the gun, which doesn't work all the time, and you aim roughly where you want the bullet to go, and pull the front trigger of your controller. No reloads, no nuanced aim, most guns don't even have iron sights. Melee is limited to having enough momentum behind your swing to make the game register your attack, and throwing is tied to what point in your swing you let go of the grip button. There is little here for VR vets, but it almost seems like a shame to let the game that helped VR become what it is today fall to the wayside. So, I can only recommend getting SuperHOT VR if you find the game on sale, and if you plan on showing VR to friends and family for the first time. Outside of that application, it can provide a few drunken laughs at a party, but who would ever let their headset get within a foot of drunk friends?